Well, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll continue with roll call.
Coy,
Here.
Langy.
Here.
Merrill,
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Murin,
Here.
Moaning,
Here.
Faust.
Here.
File.
Here.
All right, and under action, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as provided you?
I'll make the
With-
motion, Your Honor.
I'm sorry.
Sorry?
We're going to delete item number 11 at the request of Munners.
I will make that motion.
And you will allow for that deletion?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion with a second to approve the consent agenda with the deletion of item 11. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
All right, and as well, a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
A motion with a second to approve the full agenda. Again, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
Okay. Jump into special presentations. The first one that I would like to read in is the Arbor Day proclamation. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, lower our heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now therefore, I, Sue Fookman, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim April 26th, 2013 as Arbor Day in the City of Norfolk, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day by supporting efforts to protect trees and woodlands, planting and caring for trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and the future generations, and participating in a tree planting opportunity on their property or in their neighborhood. I don't know that there's anyone here to receive that tonight, but I would like to just acknowledge the efforts of the tree board, and certainly they will appreciate the efforts that we have asked of you tonight. So moving on, proclamation number 2 is for Buddy Poppy Day. And whereas the annual sale of Buddy Poppies by the veterans of foreign wars of the United States has been officially recognized and endorsed by governmental leaders since 1922, and whereas VFW Buddy Poppies are assembled by the disabled veterans, and the proceeds of this worthy fundraising campaign are used exclusively for the benefit of disabled and needy veterans and the widows and the orphans of deceased veterans, and whereas the basic purpose of the annual sale of Buddy Poppies by the VFW is eloquently reflected in the desire to honor the dead by helping the living. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Sue Fookman, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim April 27th, 2013, as Buddy Poppy Day in the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, and the surrounding area, and urge all citizens to recognize the merits of this cause by contributing generously to its support through your donation for Buddy Poppies on the day set aside for the distribution of these symbols of appreciation for the sacrifices of our honored dead. I urge all patriotic citizens to wear a Buddy Poppy as mute evidence of our gratitude to the men and the women of this country who have risked their lives in defense of the freedoms which we continue to enjoy as American citizens. And I do see someone here that I'll bet would like to come forward and accept this. Doris? Yeah, thanks, Barry. Certainly all your efforts are much appreciated. And I would like to make a statement.
With Heroes Park, we've really gone out to try to do additional things at the Veterans Home with these proceeds. Now, our auxiliary, especially our aims, it says in our bylaws that you will come to the aid of the veteran and his family in time of need. So this is where the money will be used from the proceeds from the Buddy Puppies. Thank you.
Thanks, Doris. Okay, moving on, under public hearings. First is a public hearing to amend the comprehensive plan from single-family residential to rural residential in the 1900 block of North 43rd Street at the request of ROPAC Incorporated. I will open this hearing, and Trent, are you going to talk to this?
Mayor and council, Robert Hauser came in requesting a zone change up in this area where we have some other large parcels, some 5 acres, and some even larger parcels up there, SR and RR zoning. And this was, he's incorporated, and he needed to do a land exchange in order for his incorporation that happened several years ago. And it's in an area where 5 acres, it's a good location for it. There's a house already there. It's on the very end of 43rd Street. So we met and came to an agreement on going RR in this area.
Thanks, Trent. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else that wants to come forward and speak to this issue? Or questions that might be asked? Or anyone in opposition to? If not, council, any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, do we have a planning commission report?
Yes. The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 2nd, 2013, for an amendment to the City of Norfolk's comprehensive plan from single-family residential to rural residential on property located on North 43rd Street. The amendment is necessary as ROPAC Inc. applied for a zoning change from A to RR on this 5-acre parcel. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the comp plan recommends approval.
Okay. I will close this hearing then and ask for consideration of ordinance number 5251, amending the comprehensive plan from single-family residential to rural at the 1900 block of North 43rd Street.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance number 5251.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Any further discussion at all, council? If not, short title, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the future land use map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
With that, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5251 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'd move that we suspend the rules and pass this ordinance on second and third reading.
Second.
We have a motion with a second to suspend and pass on second and third reading. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5251 carries on second and third.
And next is a public hearing at the request of ROPAC for a zoning change from A Ag District to Rural Residential District at the 1900 block of North 43rd Street in Cedar Heights subdivision. I will open this hearing, and again, Trent, anything you want to add to this at all? Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that here may have questions too, about, concerns? Seeing none. Council, any questions or? Okay. You got a planning commission report for us
The
as well?
Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 2nd, 2013, at the request of ROPAC Inc. to change the zoning from A agricultural to RR rural residential on property located on North 43rd Street. The property owners are rezoning this 5-acre parcel so they can exchange the land with another parcel. They will plat this parcel that houses a small farm. The Norfolk Planning Commission recommends approval of the zone change on an 8-0 vote.
Okay, and with that, we'll close the hearing and ask for consideration of ordinance number 5252, changing the zoning districts from Ag District to Rural Residential in the 1900 block of North 43rd Street.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance 5252.
Second.
We have a motion with a second for consideration of 5252. If no further discussion, short title.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
If you will please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5252 carries on first reading.
In your honor, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5252 on second and third reading as it appears to be fairly non-controversial.
Second that.
We have a motion with a second to suspend the rules and pass on second and third reading. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5252 carries on second and third.
Okay, we're going to move into the regular agenda and ask for consideration of approval of ordinance number 5245, approving the zone district change at the request of Moda Ambaji from C3 Service Commercial District and R1 Single Family Residential District to C3 Service Commercial District. Ordinance number 5245 was tabled at the March 4th, 2013 City Council meeting and then again at the March 18th, 2013 City Council meeting. So I would first ask for a motion to take from the table.
So moved, Your Honor. Second.
We have a motion with a second. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
Okay, and with that, we're ready to go forward with some discussion then. Am I looking to?
Yes,
whom
Your
I-
Honor. This is tabled on the request of the owner of the property, and then subsequently tabled again. I do believe their counsel is here to potentially address the council tonight. Also, just to inform the council that our prevention staff, Trent, you have issued an order to cease. Could you explain that briefly to the council?
A letter is written to Moda Abajaji on March 14th and was sent certified to him in his Omaha address. It was returned to sender, so they did not sign for it at that time, but I believe Jeff has a copy of that same letter was forwarded to him. The letter basically stated that upon further investigation of this office, in regards to the business located at Budget Inn, it basically stated that we felt that what they were doing there fell out of compliance as a motel hotel and turned into a R3 multifamily dwelling upon our investigation. So an order was written to cease and desist by May 1st. That was, obviously, there's a 30-day appeal period, and that was appealed, so.
Okay,
Also, Mayor and Council, the zoning change tonight has no bearing on our ability to enforce going forward, whether we change the zoning to a commercial zoning designation has no bearing on that order to proceed nor the appeal. So just so we're clear with the elected officials and the community that we'll continue to progress down that road and appropriate code enforcement actions will be taken.
so if I understand you right, Shane, what you're saying is no matter what action we take tonight, the enforcement still goes forward.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, where are we here? Ready for other discussion on this, obviously? Yep, Mr. Hirota, you bet. please. Yep. Introduce yourself again for us,
Yes,
will you? And just
for those
go
that
through
don't
the
know me, I'm
process.
Jeff Hirota. I'm
Thank you.
the attorney helping out the owner of Budget Inn in this zoning request. I was here last time, and I did ask to table it because I was hopeful that I'd have more information as to what Budget Inn intends to do with all its options it's exploring, as well as with its issues with the insurance company. Unfortunately, through no fault of Budget Inn, but this insurance company apparently had some issues that resulted in a new claims adjuster being assigned to the case who had to come out here, and so things got delayed. So I'm probably no farther today than I was back then as to exactly what the resolution of that will be and exactly what option the owner will have. However, I am clear on one thing, and that is all the options and all the ideas that Budget Inn will have concerning this property are going to be consistent with the C3 zoning designation. So, so what we could do tonight, we are requesting that the entire lot be designated the C3. We think that this is to correct a defect in the zoning map, because this particular lot, unfortunately, for reasons unknown to us, bears two inconsistent zoning designations, the R1 and the C3, and those two inconsistent zoning designations really can't legally exist on a single lot having a single purpose. So we think that the council should go ahead and just address this to correct that particular situation. And it is correct that there is another proceeding with Trent currently ongoing, and I anticipate that will go to its logical due process resolution as time progresses. It's been appealed, and there are separate issues or matters that will be dealt with. And I would also agree with Chairman that would, what you do tonight won't have any impact on that particular proceeding. So we would request that you consider just going ahead and addressing this zoning request and hopefully correct the zoning map, at least as we exist now, and then we can take up matters as things progress with Shane. So.
Okay, before you walk away, is there any questions that anyone might have for Mr. Hirota here?
Mr. Hirota, I'm
Yes.
not sure, how familiar are you with the history of this zoning on this piece of property?
Not very.
Okay, and
I have no
I didn't
idea
really
how it
mean-
came up. I was as surprised as anybody when I saw that zoning map, and it went, zipped right across the way the lot was. The lot's, in a kind of a L shape, and it kind of zips off the north end. And so I don't know how that happened.
And my only point was that I think history, and I'm not sure, staff might know, that at one point in time, there was a request for a zoning change on this piece of property to commercial. I'm not sure, but I was thinking that might have been the case a few years back.
See, that I'm not aware of that being requested, so I don't know. As to this particular lot, I don't know.
I don't know for sure either. I don't know, Dennis, if your memory's better than mine on that. I don't recall that, but that doesn't mean it did happen.
But
Remember
there
really good.
was a request, I guess I would have thought the council would have addressed the concern about having two different zoning designations on a single lot. So I would have, but I don't know. The C3 zoning designation would be consistent with this area. It does abut up to Norfolk Avenue, and there's C3 all around it, and I would think that would be consistent to have that frontage area be all C3, so I would think it would be consistent going that direction, as opposed to going the R1 direction, so I think we have to pick one or the other of the lots, so.
Josh?
Sir, yeah, thank you for being here, I appreciate it. Given the concerns expressed about this property, I think it's important we have a clear understanding of the intent that Budget Inn has for this property. Can you explain a little bit more why you can't elaborate on that intent right now?
Well, they haven't really decided. I mean, obviously, right now, it's still, there's two buildings there. One is not functioning at all, And the other one, of course, is still open for business and being used as a motel. I think the big concern is, between what the issues with the insurance company to determine if there's going to be sufficient capital to be able to repair the damaged building, which will take quite a bit. And so, depending on how that is resolved, will depend on what will happen with that structure. And I wouldn't say this is exclusive of any of the options, but obviously one of the options it would be to demolish the place. That is one of the matters on the table. Others, again, to repair it and, replace it. And so, no final decision has been made because we haven't been able to get the final numbers yet on what capital they have to work with.
My question, I guess both statements were made, this has really no bearing on what they decide to do and what you're trying to enforce, correct? So, do we really need to move tonight until, help me out here, or do we wait until they have a comprehensive plan to present to us?
I think it depends on what the mayor and council's crystal ball tells them this particular area of our community would be utilized for in the future when you look at it, when you look at it functionally and you look towards a potential for economic development in that area along East Norfolk Avenue, what you think the flavor or the spirit of that area would be in your minds coming into our town. R1, it'd be argued that R1 probably isn't the greatest use right there for that gateway. And when I look at it, I guess my mind tells me that it's the spirit of commercial is alive and well there. So the zoning would support that. Also we do have a blighted and substandard study being conducted by the district on that particular area of town that hasn't produced any results yet, but we anticipate that happening pretty soon. So, I think it offers up opportunity going forward for this owner or any other owner maybe to move to develop that in a commercial fashion. So it kind of depends on what your crystal ball thinks, on that. So I don't, from a staff's perspective, this change in the zoning really doesn't hurt our chances of going forward and enforcing the code enforcement issues that exist on that property.
I guess I was kind of on the same line as Shane. What's the hurry? I guess in my mind, the zoning change, what's your concern and that you're
Well,
representing is future insurability. They already have insurance on this property that's been damaged. But what you're saying is moving forward is future insurability, correct?
Well, not only that, but just the future use of it, because if you look at the zoning, this is inconsistent zoning with regard to a single lot. We have to get it changed. It's gonna have to occur, whether it occurs today or whether it occurs later. We gotta clear this defect up. And, going with the C3, that just eliminates that as an issue, because we'd have issues with building permits, until this is cleared up. We'll have issues with the viability of selling this property, because, the new buyer is gonna need to have this zoning problem resolved. And then, so it would be nice to be able to take this issue, which is, we see it as fairly non-controversial, and deal with it so that maybe we can concentrate our efforts on the controversial issues and hopefully get those resolved.
In the arena of economic development, as many of those things as you can align, those stars you can align for your community in particular, we're trying to do that all the time, where we're getting trying to remove as many hurdles as possible for folks to come in and develop it, how the mayor and council see that crystal ball again to line up. And you have to ask yourselves that question here. If you change the zoning, we can still move forward with the code enforcement, which is obviously an issue, and it allows another hurdle to be brought down immediately, which potentially gives either the owner or some future owner removes one of those hurdles. So the timing of that, and in essence what that means to the community and economic development is a question in my mind that we're dealing with tonight.
I guess my point is, I mean, we just dealt with this with the CVS pharmacy, somewhat similar with zoning changes where we could see a plan. It was a simple decision. This is like we're planning for nothing.
If I can address it, the problem is that this lot is already C3. So it's already has a use currently anyway. All we're trying to do is correct what we feel was probably an oversight when the zoning map was adopted. Because the budget in's been there long before the zoning came in, so they had to know those two buildings were there when they adopted the zoning map, or at least they could have found out. But I don't know how it happened this way, but that's the way the zoning map is currently, and it does need to be corrected one way or the other. And having the C3 being the choice we'd make, since we're already C3 on part of the lot, would be the best for the area, and like I say, it eliminates an issue that I think is, it should be fairly, uncontroversial.
Jeff,
We'd like to, yeah,
do you, what, the budget in, what is that? Is it a motel?
yeah.
Okay, but it's not being used as a motel. So what we're looking at is, they want us to change the zoning, and they're not doing what they're supposed to. That's why we have some ordinances against them, and we're coming to try and straighten this out. Our back's against the wall where you want us to change the zoning to make everything all right, but we don't know what's gonna happen, and we have no way to take care of that. We do have the building permits, we do have that, but it's a little tougher when we have everybody in that community. I've gotten a bunch of phone calls on this, knowing what's going on there, knowing how they're running their business, and it's not a motel. So if they think it is, they don't know what's going on in their own business. Do they know what they're doing?
Well, that matter will be addressed, David.
Okay.
Because there'll be actually, the due process will allow for that issue to be explored and dealt with. because
But my
there's
question is,
enforcement
we haven't got to talk to them, so you're their spokesman. Do they know what they're doing?
I would hope so.
Okay, so they know they're breaking the law.
Well, I think they dispute that.
Okay,
So that, like I
Well,
said, that there's two sides.
we will
to every
figure that
story.
out, but yeah, we have evidence
Yeah.
otherwise, so.
Well, and issues like that possibly could be cured through different policies and more oversight and some management decisions that to prevent those improper uses from being continued if they were.
I'm kind of
So
like,
I'm just saying,
I'm kind of
those
like,
are issues that, and that,
No, I
right now,
understand.
of course,
I'm
current,
kind of like Dale and Shane and some of the other guys, though. I'm real hesitant to change the rules when we have people that are already not playing by the rules. So I would just soon see it tabled or something else done tonight than to open the door for us to go a different direction, even since we're playing with some people that know what they're doing and we are not in agreement with them. So,
Clint, do we have the ability, as there's been a lot of discussion about this for many weeks now, and probably even longer than that. Do we have a definition that really allows us to hang our hat on what a motel is or isn't? Or, I know we talked about this in staff one day, and it gets a little difficult when you,
First of all, let me respond to that. Trent, how is the comprehensive plan address this problem?
I don't remember, to tell you the truth. I don't have my book with me either. I think it's commercial. That whole area, it just says commercial, I believe.
So, my understanding is that, so if that's the case, the issue that's before the council is to change the zoning the zoning designation on this property from residential to something that's consistent with the city's own comprehensive plan. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. The second thing is that as it relates to the enforcement action that's pending, let's make sure everybody understands what's happening with that. The letter that Trent sent to the property owner with a copy to Jeff, and even though it was returned, we're going to assume that you got it because you filed the appeal, so I think we're okay on that. But that
Got me
appeal,
there.
that appeal basically says that, and Trent, you correct me where I'm wrong, because I don't have the letter in front of me, but your letter basically says, it answers it's not being used in a manner like a motel is being used. Now, you know, we got 70 pages of definitions, Mayor, but Jeff would probably say we don't have the right one, okay? We respectfully disagree with him in regard to that. We think that there is a definition in there that talks about a motel is something with transitory, what's the word, Trent?
Transient or non-transient.
Transient housing, okay? So the issues are that when we go before the Board of Appeals, and the process is there to do that, we have the opportunity to say why we don't think it's being used in that manner. Jeff and his client have the opportunity to say why it is that they think that it is. The most important part probably about that is that in order for this to be used the way that we think it's being used, it's got to be zoned
R3.
R3. We think it's like, we don't think we've got many apartments where, we think it's more like an apartment. People are there for a long period of time and so on and so forth. It's got to be in an R3 zone to be used the way that we think that the property is being used. If it's in an R1 zone, our view of it is that it's being used improperly. If it's in a commercial zone, which is where he's wanting to move it to, we think that it's being used improperly in either event. Jeff probably would argue otherwise just for the sport. But in any regard, that's really the issue that's going to come before the Board of Appeals, is whether they agree with the facts that Jeff and his client put forward in regard to how the property is being used. And on the other hand, we'll be providing some information about how we think it's being used. And then if the board will make a determination that's of whether it is being used as a motel in the traditional sense, or if it's being used in some other extended stay manner that's not consistent with the zoning. Once the board makes that decision, if that decision goes not to the liking of Mr. Hirot's client, he can file an appeal and it can go to the district court. Similarly, if that is filed, if the Board of Appeals makes a decision that is not in liking to this council, you can direct the staff to appeal that decision to the district court as well. So that's going to happen regardless of whether the zoning goes forward or whether the zoning doesn't go forward. And all the arguments, Mayor, that go to exactly why we think that it's appropriate for Trent to send the letter and say that you're not using it in an appropriate manner, those are really items which are appropriate, and it's provided for those to be dealt with in that Board of Appeal process, which Mr. Hirota has requested, and I think that request was just made. I don't think that there's been a time set for that hearing, but that's kind of where we're at. So I hope that's responsive to your question.
Phew. Thanks, Glenn. It's hard, it's difficult, and I sit here and I try to think. Right now, the part that's sitting there and is currently being used, right?
That's that part, that one is
Yes.
clearly in the C3.
Yes.
So
And it's being operated as a motel.
that's what we understand.
That's
it to
what
be,
you
which is-
understand.
Which is a C3, of course, obviously allows for motels
Right.
to be operated.
Absolutely.
And that's the way, the other part was being
And-
operated as well.
Okay.
We don't
buy that.
We're not buying what Jeff's selling in regard
I
to
got you,
that.
okay, all right. I just wanted to make that clarification for myself. So,
But
And I'm not sure whether that designation calls for an extended stay motel.
I understand that, and again, that gets into that
But
stuff of,
regardless, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot that happens until the zoning is changed. Notwithstanding the keeping the keeping everything running right over there, whatever they're breaking, that can be dealt with as a separate issue. I don't think that.
It is, more or less.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
I understand that it is. But I think the thing's just going to sit there in first gear and never get going if the zoning doesn't change.
If I may?
Sure.
You know, at the end of the day, Councilman, one of the things that, I think we have a mechanism in place to address how that property's being used and so on and so forth. Some of that is factually based. What are those facts? Some of that is, the conclusions that you reach from those facts or what you think that the code says or whatever. I think the most important part, and I don't want to talk too long, Mayor, but I think the most important part of it is you have a property owner here before you that's asking you to zone the property that his client owns in the same way that the comprehensive plan is saying that you want the property zoned. That's probably the most relevant issue, I think, that's before the council this evening.
I totally agree with that. We have a property owner who's here asking us to rezone this, so it helps them out. But we have a property owner who we believe is incompliant. And we also have a property owner who's making a request without a clear definition of what they're going to do. That's where it gets kind of like, that's where everybody's sitting there going,
And-
that's where we're going back and forth.
I understand
so.
completely. Just to address that, at least at this point, whatever I've been told, that whatever budget is going to do, whatever use that will be consistent with the C3, no matter what. So what this does is it enhances the ability, enhances the ability of the budget in to explore all the options. And that would include a sale, that would include demolition, or restructuring the existing motel in such a manner that it will meet TRED's objections and would be able to continue. And if they can't do it, of course, then the order eventually, a court will affirm a cease and desist order, and they'll just be barred from doing what they had been doing. But it wouldn't bar them from using the property consistent with the C3 zoning that's approved by our zoning request, so we could still operate a business there.
Generally, I think we all understand the benefit of consistent zoning over the long term. But to me, the underlying point is we have here an entity making a request for a zone change, and that entity is under question for possible code violations. We're asking for some kind of intent on what this entity is going to do with this property, and we don't have a lot of answers right now. I'm not comfortable
Josh?
moving forward without
Let me
more
just,
answers.
okay, and I appreciate that. If they were to come before us, though, and say what they're going to do is rebuild, we really, what ability do we have right now to, because help me out here, Clint, can we, if it's not zoned to bring it all into compliance under C3, they could not do so. Is that a true statement? No, okay?
Mayor, council, I guess I cannot issue a building permit for that. If he wants to either fix what's there, tear
Yes.
it down and rebuild, I cannot issue a building permit, and I won't since it's R1.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
And I'm with Shane and a couple other people. We're looking at the person that's been doing this, and he's asking us to do something, but he hasn't been honoring this system for years. And I've gotten phone calls from the neighbors for years saying what's going on over there, and we have reports and we have all this. That's what concerns me, is that if we start rezoning this and start helping this along, the neighborhood is not happy, and they haven't been happy for years. And we've tabled this twice, waiting for somebody to come talk to us, and it's very unclear what's going on, and that's where we have trouble making a decision. If you just look at it black and white, yeah, it's an easy decision, but not in this case, it's not easy, so.
In my mind, it'd almost be an easier decision if we were changing it to R3.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, in our understanding, that's how it's been being used. So we're condoning a non-compliant user by okaying this zoning change. I understand uniformity. But my fear is we pass it and then we're in appeals process for 3 or 4 years and my constituents have no way to speed that along. We're in a perpetual appeals process that will never address the true issue. If this was a good neighbor and a good standing business in the community, I think this would already be passed. So it's kind of like their past is catching up with their future.
Well, and, you know, as we wait for the litigation to work itself out, obviously, we have a difference of opinion here on what a motel is and what it is not. And I think there's something to be said about the fact that I know what I believe a motel is. Obviously, your client has a different opinion, and maybe that does need to be the first resolution that we see before us before we make a decision. I don't know. I mean, as I sit here and think about this, because if it were to come back, it has been operated as such, what would our concern then be?
Well, he's
I don't know,
certainly,
it's-
certainly non-compliant. There's no getting around that. And whether you like what's going on over there, or you don't like what's going on over there, if I were that property owner and I wanted to do something with that property, then my decision on what I'm going to do with it hangs on how the zoning's going to come out.
I get that, Rob.
Yeah.
But like I say, I also understand that, you know, there's litigation that's going to make a, I don't know, it's,
Well, there's a lot
Well,
of
I say-
litigation on either side.
Like I say, in
Either
order
way.
for
Yeah.
Budget In to move forward, though, and to be able to enhance their options to get
Right.
this resolved so everybody is happy, they are going to need to have this C3 zoning designation, you know, for the entire lot. So we have to get this map corrected at some point, you know, no matter what they do. And of course, they can't do anything with respect to the damaged building without a approved building permit process, you know, if they wanted to try to fix it. And also, I assume that there are processes, if they wanted to demolish it, they'd have to get appropriate permits and apply with codes and stuff like that, too.
Well, I'm thinking that
So,
if you went ahead with it and you started, Trent, you're going to be over there, the guy wouldn't be able to plug in a toaster without thinking twice about it. Because we're going to keep an eye on his compliance.
counsel,
But I don't,
I'm sure that's what would happen with anybody.
go
Does a
forward.
good
You had
job.
a comment to be made yet?
Well, I think there's, just from what I've heard, I think there's 3 comments that need to be made. One is, code describes a motel, wonderful thing, it says motel, see hotel. When you see hotel, it says, a hotel means a building or portion thereof, a group of buildings offering transient lodging accommodations on a daily rate to the general public, providing additional services such as restaurants, meeting rooms, and recreational facilities. The word hotel includes motel, inn, automobile court, motor inn, motor lodge, motor court, tourist court, motor hotel, or other similar designations. Jeff may or may not agree with me. I think that at the end of the day, what we're focusing in on is transient. Transient does not have a definition in this code. Transient has definitions in the dictionary and so on and so forth. So I don't know if Jeff agrees with me or not. I think the question is whether the facts support whether or not the property is being owned as a transient lodging accommodation. That's one thing. Second thing is, keep in mind, I'm not aware of the property owner here. I understand the letter that's come forth from Trent, and we talk about all these conclusions that the property's not been properly used and so on and so forth. I don't think there's been any enforcement action taken against the property owner heretofore. So whether that's, you know, we all reach our own conclusions about that, but that's the way that it is. The third thing is, what's before the council is a request to zone the property as C3. Now, I think that, I'm exactly opposite, I think, maybe from where the council is here. Because I think it's refreshing to see somebody come before the council and not say, I want to build this, and focus everybody's attention on, I want to build this, when they're making the change of the zoning to C3. Because when you look at what the zoning code does and how zoning works, when you change that zoning to C3, they don't need to make that cat hospital or that store that they're telling you about or whatever it is. They can do anything in that whole panoramic view of what's in the C3 thing. So when Mr. Hirota is asking for them, when they're making the request of you to do that, I'm not, I mean, I understand the desire to know what their interest is, and in the discussions I've had with Jeff, I know that they've talked about, depending upon what the insurance does and so on and so forth, maybe they raise it, maybe they do whatever. If they're gonna try to operate the building in the way that they have in the past, or the way that we think it is, we're going to be hammering out, one way or the other, what it is they're doing, or how they need to tweak it, if they're not in compliance, what they would need to do to bring it into compliance. And so those are the, that's the definition. I think that's the issue that we're gonna be talking about, is what transient is, and that's kind of where we're at, so.
Also, Mayor and Council, I'd encourage you to ask yourself, if you're getting complaints about the property, which I believe you are, because city staff's receiving the same similar complaints, how fast, whether we zone it or not, we're gonna go through the appeal process, that's gonna take a certain amount of time. But if you zone it correctly, as it's designed to be zoned, then does that open up an opportunity to move the property in a positive direction quicker than just sitting on R1? Because if you sit on R1, it makes me wonder if you're really just prolonging the agony for the community and the folks that are calling you, because you don't have as much opportunity to move the property, fix it or move it, if it's zoned R1, only if it's zoned appropriately. So that's kind of the big question that you got to ask yourself in my mind.
Yeah, if I wasn't clear enough, what I was wanted to communicate is that I do, by allowing this correction of the zoning, it's enhancing the owner's ability to resolve the matter. Because this will be one issue now off the table. It may make the lot more attractive to a different owner if they decide they want to sell it, make it easier through the building permit process. Although Trent would be on our tail to make sure we do comply with any codes and the zoning use. And obviously the issue of how the property was used, will be addressed in due process. So, we just like the
Okay.
council to consider that.
Mr. Hirota, thanks very much. Any other questions before you? A lot of discussion, gentlemen. Jim?
I don't have a question for Mr. Hirota so much as I do for permits and codes.
Okay.
Throw this area on out, say if I'm up on Riverside Boulevard, and I've got a commercial business and I've got a residential lot next to me and I want to expand to it, how difficult would it be for me at this point in time to do that on up if both of them were all surrounded by commercial? Would it be more of a housekeeping issue or not? If I had an area that was basically encompassed, let's not take, let's take 13th Street. How difficult is that? To me, this really appears, and you don't need to answer it, that to me, this really appears to be, again, as he pointed out, that two pieces of property were in existence long before the particular zoning came into effect, and that worked about for about two or three different times. I know from my experience with it from in the 90s to now that way. And those are things that a lot of times got addressed as house keeping issues that way. And because we have somebody here that is doing something else that's not an issue, that's in my opinion, not how you handle enforcement of improper use of property. It is, though, you make the zoning so that it is reflective of the highest and best use of the property.
Well spoken, Mr. Previous Planning Chair. I understand what you're saying. Any further discussion, gentlemen? Please come forward if, sorry.
Jeff, you forgot to sign in, but. I didn't want to.
Way to keep him honest there.
Sheet up here.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm here once again opposing this zoning change. And what better person to be here to oppose a zoning change than the next door neighbor? You know, I own property next to that property, adjacent to that property. As a matter of fact, part of my property is residential zone. And you don't see me here asking for a change of zoning. I have my property for sale, and ultimately the person that would buy that property would seek the right zoning for that property to develop it into a commercial property. The zoning change that's before you basically is going to allow a person that is operating the hotel in a manner it's not supposed to be operated to go forward, rebuild the hotel. Once you give the zoning change, that person has the capability of obtaining his building permit, which is what he wants. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So here we have an opportunity. The city council has an opportunity, and you have a responsibility to the neighbors that have been calling you, including myself, including the other neighbors that have been calling you, to say enough is enough. We have a way of stopping this tonight. We've tabled this long enough. We have an opportunity to stop this tonight by basically saying that this area will not be zoned commercial until a proposed plan, just like CVS Pharmacy has for the corner of 13th Street, unless there's a plan in place that will allow us to see the future of this property. Don't allow this to go forward. You would be doing an injustice to the property owners, the people that are in that neighborhood, including myself. That hotel hasn't been operating properly for many years, and we have not done anything about it. This is an opportunity we have tonight.
Any questions for Al?
Mr. Reggie, when, in the past, when you've expressed concerns with that property owner, what is the response? Is there engaged ownership day-to-day in that property?
Basically, the responses that we have gotten in the past has been the responses that you folks have gotten. Asking to talk to somebody and nobody shows up, asking for somebody to do something and they don't do it. I mean, we had this meeting a month ago, and I brought up at the meeting that the property owner is dumping garbage on our property. They have been doing it for years. I've owned that property there for 5 years. They dump their garbage in our property, in the back of our property. We have asked them to stop doing that. The folks at Speedway, their fence is back there, and these guys throw furniture and mattresses over the fence. And they have to get a garbage hauler to come and haul this stuff away. They are not the right thing. By giving them this C3 zoning, you're going to endorse them to get a building permit to build on that building. And then the appeal process will go, and then we'll have to deal with the appeal process. This is our opportunity. This is the community of Norfolk's opportunity to stop this process from going forward. Once they have a plan in place and they come and say, we're going to develop this property into something that is conducive with what that area is designed for, and a new business or a business that will do the right thing, then give them the permit, give them the change. I will be in front of you here within probably a few months asking for a zoning change. Part of my property that's west of my property is an R1 zoning, and I have commercial next to it. So please, don't pass this and say no tonight. We've gone enough.
Thanks, Al. Any questions for Al before he walks away? Anyone? Okay, appreciate your being here. Are we ready to go? Anyone else that wants to come and speak? Sure.
My name is Pat O'Gorman. I lived at 801 East Norfolk Avenue for about 55 years. I run Mary's. The lot that Mr. Rajay is talking about to the west of Mary's, we bought that from the motel 30 years ago, 35 years ago, spent $100,000 on it. Proper to the north of Mary's, the cafe, is not zoned properly. And at one time I went, I don't even know who it was, Mike Nolan. We asked him about it. He said, forget it, we're not gonna change it. Now you people want to change it? I don't understand it. This place has been, the motel has been in disarray for 30 years. My mother and I, who was Mary Elskabota, tried to buy the place to tear it down. I can't see where there's any problem at all. I would not change the zoning. I'd tell them to tear it down, and really, they should red tag the whole thing. That's the way I look at it. I was there longer than anybody. Just get rid of it and be done with it. Thank you. Any questions? No? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. O'Gorman. Is there anyone else? All right, council, are we ready to take action here? Any other comments, discussion, anything? I think we've had much discussion. So where are we? Consideration of the ordinance? Where am I, Beth? Do I have a?
We need a motion on the ordinance.
Okay, so I need a motion for consideration of ordinance 5245, approving the zoning district change from C3 and R1 to C3.
I'll make the motion.
Second that, Your Honor.
We have a motion with a second. Again, like I say, I think we've had plenty of discussion. Is there a short title on this, Beth, or?
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
Voting in favor of the ordinance, councilpersons Langy and Murin. Voting against the ordinance, council members Coy, Merrill, Clausen, Moaning, Faust, and File. Motion fails.
Okay, great discussion. I appreciate you folks being here tonight. We're going to move on then to consideration to approve the Municipal Electrical Interest Groups Agreement for the City of Norfolk. Do it. Dennis, I guess I need a motion on this first, though.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of the agreement for the MEIG, I believe.
All right, I have a motion. How about a second?
Second?
We have a motion with a second. We're going to look to you, I'll bet, Dennis, to give us short information.
This is a group that's being organized by Lowell Johnson and drawing a blank, gentleman from Central City and the League of Municipalities to encourage municipalities to get together and have a united voice in our discussions with NPPD as it relates to rate setting and policy decisions. It's just a group to try to have a more organized voice, see if we can't get a little bit better representation of the municipal interests in that overall organization. There's no cost for belonging to this organization per se. If there's any consultants that are needed for dealing with the various rate issues, it's a voluntary contribution to help fund those consultants at this point in time. One of the issues that's being dealt with currently is how transmission rates will be calculated in the future. So would recommend approval, and we'll answer any questions that anyone might have.
Anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
So Dennis, is this just first-class cities or?
This is open to any municipal government that is an NPPD customer. So it's open probably to most of the state of Nebraska. A part of the western part of Nebraska is not served by NPPD, but this is open to municipals that are either wholesale customers of NPPD or retail customers. Norfolk is a retail customer of NPPD. Madison, Wayne, those are wholesale customers of NPPD. The eastern three-quarters plus of the state, and maybe even a little more, I think it's the far northwest corner, less the counties that OPPD serves, would probably have a interest in this organization.
Dennis, is there any type of a financial obligation that we have? Is it a membership fee type of deal, or is it just basically a group getting together with a common interest?
It's a group getting together with a common interest. There's no annual membership fee. As I said, there may be some requests for some helping with funding on some things related to specific issues.
I think, Mayor and Council, it's also important to recognize that we in this group has been in discussions with NPPD in a very proactive manner from our part and from NPPD's part. So they've been encouraging of us to seek out like interest and inform them, and keeping this completely transparent in their decision making in their business model for NPPD. So it's been a good relationship, and I anticipate being a good relationship going forward as well.
And I will say, Council, I've sat in on a couple of those meetings that are well over my head, but we have great representation there with Dennis. So I do appreciate, Dennis, what you're doing, and certainly if MPPD is supportive of this, then it seems to me like it's a great partnership.
Dennis, is there currently an advisory board of municipalities that sits with NPPD and discusses any of this? So is this group replacing a group that already exists?
It's not really replacing a group that already exists. There are some individual members on a couple of committees with NPPD that has some municipal representation. My personal opinion is that the retail municipals are underrepresented in that group. But this would be more, I think, of a group trying to get us to talk about our common interests away from NPPD and in front of the rurals. The way the rural organizations are structured, they have a very strong public advocacy group for them. There's around 25 rurals in the state. You've got about 4 of them that are fairly large, that are independent: Southern, Perennial, Loop, and Norris. The other 21 or 2 are all part of what they call GNT, stands for Generation and Transmission. And they have actually what happens is they've got a small amount that's added on, an adder to all of their bills that they have a full-time staff of this GNT that helps with lobbying. NPPD helps them with rate setting and all of those discussions. And they have an individual that probably attends every NPPD board meeting, every subcommittee meeting, I think, and is probably in their office beyond that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, I would please ask you to vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
And next, it would be consideration to approve resolution number 2013-10, providing for the City of Norfolk approval of alley vacation ordinance, plating and subdivision agreement, all related to the CVS development of property located on the southwest corner of the intersection of 13th Street and Norfolk Avenue, following CVS's acquiring ownership of the proposed development area. Can I have a motion?
I'd introduce Resolution 2013-10.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do you want to bring us quickly up to date on this, Dennis?
CVS has been working on putting together the development there on the southwest corner of Norfolk Avenue and 13th Street. And one of their corporate policies is that they want to have every T crossed and every I dotted as far as permits, zoning changes, and all of that before they'll actually acquire the property. They made a decision that as opposed to trying to get 12 property owner signatures and their lien holders to execute the final plat, that they would execute the final plat after they got ownership. Creates a little bit of a dilemma for the city of Norfolk in that would be asking the mayor and city council to approve a final plat that they don't have all their signatures on and can't put all their signatures on. So staff brainstormed and we came up with an option to have the council say, if you bring us back these documents in basically this form, we will approve them after you've got your ownership taken care of. They've been diligently working on that. They've got some issues related to Corporation Gulch and the land under there that they're still dealing with. And in fact, as of this afternoon, they changed their platting a little bit from a 5 subdivision plat down to 4. What they did is they took lots 3 and 4 and combined those, which is Corporation Gulch and the property that was on the west side of Corporation Gulch, into a single lot. And the new drawing of that was provided to you earlier this evening, and then renumbered lot 5 to lot 4. That came about because they've got information now that says Corporation, or the Sanitary District of Norfolk does not own Corporation Gulch, and they've come to that conclusion. They're still trying to figure out who actually does own it and how they're gonna get title to that, and they're working on that. So that is a positive thing, I think, from our standpoint, is that those 2 lots are put together. Lot 4 was unbuildable due to its size and other things. They've also completed the revised subdivision agreement to reflect the lots that are in this subdivision. One thing that is still coming tomorrow is that we will get a revised grading plan that will be attached to the subdivision agreement to reflect changing the subdivision from 5 lots to 4 lots. All that said, I would recommend that the mayor and council approve this resolution, because all it really says is that if you come back showing us ownership of all of this property with an abstract or certificate, we will sign this agreement or these documents in the form that they've been presented. It also allows, if between now and then that there's some minor changes that occur, that as long as they are changes that are for the benefit of the public and the benefit of the good, that we'll take action on those that is positive. So, try to answer any questions you might have. Tracy Bittner is here this evening representing CVS. So,
Okay, council has a question here?
Dennis, one question that I think is important is that as we've looked at this in past weeks and months, one of the issues that's been a significant issue and went to the Department of Roads is about the location of the driveway onto Norfolk Avenue and where that lines up relative to the break in the items, correct?
correct.
The items that are before the council, the items which are attached to the resolution, basically saying that if this resolution is adopted by the council, it says that you don't see any, basically this resolution says you don't see anything wrong with the alley vacation document, the ordinance, which would come back as the alley vacation document, the plat, which is before you, which Dennis talked about being substituted, and the accompanying subdivision agreement. So if those come back to you in that same form with the proper people owning them, you're saying you're gonna approve them. But when you look at those, you don't see the alley, or you don't see the driveway on here, do you?
You don't see the driveway on the documents that we handed out new.
And the documents that are attached to the resolution, 1, 2, and 3, or A, B, and C, however we numbered them, you don't see them on there either.
Well, you do if you look on the one that's on the agenda packet, in that there's an attachment to the subdivision agreement that has to be updated yet, that shows the location of all the driveways. The subdivision agreement in paragraph 5 references that document and shows where those are. And the latest addition to that was made last week accommodated the interest of the Department of Roads in requiring that that driveway be moved, that the right-in, right-out along Norfolk Avenue be moved a little farther west so that there wouldn't be any, looks like you could get into that driveway if you were westbound. They just wanted it moved a little bit farther west to make sure that it was clearly beyond the end of the island. And CVS had accommodated that, so.
And so it's there, it's just attached by reference. And so if you were to approve this resolution, when it comes back to you, what would happen is basically you would anticipate that the staff would be saying, hey, we've reviewed these documents and we've looked at the ownership data and all of this kind of stuff. And everything's the same way that it was when it was before you on April 15th. And if there have been any tweaks or whatever, then Dennis or whoever it applies to will be telling you what the difference is. So that's why you don't see that, and yet the driveway was an important thing.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, discussion? And again, I think we all understand, all 12 owners have to be a part of that, right, Dennis?
All what?
12 owners, property owners?
Actually,
Yes?
no, the reason that we're doing this resolution is so that they didn't have to get all 12 owners' signatures on there in the lien holders. We're saying, we're allowing CVS to go out and acquire all those and then come in and put their signature on there as the owner of all those lots. And what they're saying is they want some assurance from the mayor and city council that this subdivision
forward.
will be approved if we go out and buy all this property.
Right.
They don't want to have that discussion we just had that says, well, you didn't do what you were gonna do.
Got you. All right. All right, are we ready to vote here? We have a motion, we've had discussion. Ready to vote? Please do.
All council members voting in the affirmative. Resolution 2013-10 is adopted.
All right. I'm debating here. I think maybe it would be best if we skipped down and did their administrative reports, the presentation of the comprehensive financial report for the year ending September 30th, 2012.
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, I didn't see you there, Randy. You're on.
All right, thank you. There are 3 financial reports, including the agenda packets under enclosure 34, beginning on page 104 of your agenda packets. The first is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR. Then comes the single audit reports, and finally, the auditor's management letter. The first report in the agenda packets is our CAFR on pages 104 through 239 of the agenda packets. I think the best place to look for a good broad overview of the city's financial condition is the 2 government-wide financial statements on pages 30 and 31 of the CAFR, which are pages 142 and 143 of the agenda packets. These are prepared on a full accrual basis, similar to what you would see in a business financial statement, like you're used to seeing in your own private businesses. The statement of activities on page 31 is similar to a business income statement, and that's what I'll focus on for this review. If you look at that page, the statement of activities on page 31 of the CAFR or page 143 of the agenda packets. You'll notice that on the top, basically it's in two pieces. The top half, which focuses on each specific function the government performs, public safety, for instance, public library. And those are listed down the side. And then there's also listed our business functions, business type activities, water, sewer, and solid waste. And then on immediately to the right of that is the expenses for each one of those government functions the city of Norfolk performs. And then the next three columns have the program revenues for each of those functions, broken down by charges for services, operating grants and contributions, capital grants and contributions. And then the next column over, or the next columns over, I should say, are the net cost of providing those government functions. There are two columns for this. The first is the net cost of the governmental activities. And the governmental activities are those traditional government services for which you don't expect to receive program revenues sufficient to cover the cost. For instance, public safety. You would not expect, even though you're going to charge for ambulance services and some of those types of things, you would not expect you'd be able to cover all the costs of public safety from those charges. Business activities, on the other hand, are those types of activities where you do expect to recover the cost of those services from charges and program revenues. And as you would expect, all of the governmental activities show a net expense in that column. All of the business type activities, as you would hope, show net revenue in those columns. And then on the very far right-hand column is the same numbers for the prior year, the net cost of all those functions. When you get down to the bottom of the statement, that's where you see the general revenues that are going to cover the cost of the net cost of providing those services. Primarily the governmental type activities up at the top, for instance, the property taxes, sales taxes, those kinds of things that aren't specifically allocated to a particular governmental function, but are going to provide, make up the difference between the revenues received for those and the cost of those. And when those general revenues are combined with the net program expense or revenue above, you get the net change in assets for the year for either the governmental activities or the business activities or in total. And that's what would be similar to a net income for a business. And that's the third line from the bottom on these statements. You'll see we had about a $5.9 million increase in net assets during the year, or what would be called net income if we were a business. And that's comparable compared to the $4.7 million of increase in net assets or net income we had last year. $3.4 million of that is the change in net assets for the governmental activities. And that's almost identical to the $3.5 million we had last year. Some of the bigger contributors to that increase are sales tax growth. Sales tax is by far our biggest general fund revenue source. That's the second line down in the general revenues column, and as you can see, that went from less than $7.1 million last year to over $7.6 million this year. So that was a big contributor to the growth in net assets and governmental activities. Occupation tax for the payment of the rec bonds, that's the occupation tax we had on food and beverages and hotel. That's coming in much better than we anticipated at the time we originally did the bond issue and when we set the amortization schedule for that. Unspent occupation tax that we collected this year over and above what we paid for debt service was about $600,000. That's another big contributor to the increase in net assets. You can see the occupation taxes are the fourth line down in the general revenues, and they increased about $500,000 this year from the prior year, and that's primarily because of those occupation taxes I just talked about, which are now in effect for a full year. We're only in effect for part of the fiscal year before. The city's LB 840 fund also increases about $450,000 this year since we collected revenue, but we did not yet have any projects funded as of the end of September. $2.5 million is the net revenue or net income for the business type activities. That's the city's 3 enterprise funds, the water, sewer, solid waste funds. All 3 had a increase in net assets or a positive net income as you would hope for. Water fund had the biggest increase of $1.4 million, and there was $1.1 million increase in the sewer fund. And the water and sewer rates have been set to fund the large capital improvements shown in the water and sewer master plans that we've got planned for this decade. And we also got a boost this year in the water fund from the hot, dry weather. That increased use fees about $500,000 in the water fund. And the sewer fund had a 7% rate increase this year. The net cost of most of the governmental activities shown in the top half of the statement of activities is very similar to last year with a couple of exceptions. The general government, which is the first line on this statement, had a net expense of about $1.2 million last year compared to $2 million this year. That's a pretty big increase, and at first you might wonder what the heck caused that. And generally accepted accounting principles, and this is one of the things I don't like about the way we got to present these citywide statements, but for internal service funds and generally accepted accounting principles on these citywide statements, their net change in assets has to be presented in the general government line. Our internal service fund, the group insurance fund, is where we fund our employee health cost, and there was a $911,000 increase in group benefit claims this year. That fund still had a slight positive increase in net assets, but not near as much as the year before. And that $900,000 is the main reason for that big increase in net general governmental expenditures. The second largest change in net expense is in the Parks and Rec. This one's a little more interesting to talk about and one that makes sense. This relates primarily to the big rec project we had this year. We issued $16.4 million of bonds at the end of 2010 for that. And we spent that over the last 2 years. And this year we put most of those assets into service. And the expenses you see over on the far left-hand column under Parks, Recs, and Park, Recreation, and Public Property, which is the fifth line down, are about $2.2 million. That was only $1.5 million last year. So you got about a $0.7 million increase in rec expenditures. These are primarily related to those new facilities, and they're broken down almost 50-50 between depreciation expense and actual cash type expenditures. There was about $315,000 of depreciation expense, or $316,000, excuse me, and $315,000 of, for instance, there was personnel costs for the pool staff and concessions of $213,000 this year. O&M for the pool and concessions was about $103,000. So you've got total cash expenditures related to these facilities of about $316,000. But offsetting that, we had a good increase in revenues. The numbers are reported under that user fee or charges for services column over there, $471,000. $330,000 of that is pool revenue, and $77,000 of that is concession revenue. So we had total revenue of $408,000 that more than offsets that $316,000 of cash expenditure. So our cash from those operations was positive, but we had $316,000 of depreciation expense that's shown in that net column over there. So that's how come that Park, Rec, and Public Property number went up so high. It was because of the depreciation expense offset a little bit by some positive cash flow from the operations of those facilities. And as those assets went into service during the year, I'll just kind of give a brief rundown of when we started depreciating them, because it's kind of interesting what the dollar amounts were of each of those pieces. The football piece was $1.9 million that went into service and started depreciation in October on our books. Baseball at Memorial Park was $0.9 million in March. Baseball at Taha, $0.4 million in June. Aquatics, $7.3 million in June. And the share of Memorial Park facilities, $5.8 million in June. For total cost capitalized and depreciated last year of $16.3 million. And as I said, the depreciation expense on those was $315,000. We still got a little work left to do at Taha this year, which will spend out the last of those bond proceeds. That's all I intend to talk about the CAFR. I'll answer any questions people have on it if they have any later. But the second report in the agenda packets is the single audit reports, and those are really three separate reports beginning on page 240 of your agenda packets. The first report is the supplementary schedule of auditor's report on the supplementary schedule of federal financial assistance, which is page 242 of the agenda packets. And that's giving the report on the actual schedule on page 244. This shows that the city expended $856,522 of federal funds this year. The remaining single audit reports are the report on internal control over financial reporting and the report on the city's compliance with major federal program requirements. All three reports are clean reports, except for the finding on internal control for financial reporting. And that's a finding generated whenever there are auditor proposed adjustments, and almost always there are some auditor proposed adjustments, and this year was no exception. Other than that, all the reports were clean reports. The last report in the agenda packets is a required communication from the auditors. We used to refer to this as a management letter, and that's on page 252 of the agenda packets. And this letter talks about the auditor's responsibilities under generally accepted auditing standards. And except for the proposed auditor adjustments I talked about previously, this is a clean report. No disagreements with management or other difficulties performing the audit. I'd answer any questions.
Well done, Randy.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? As stated, if you do counsel at any point, you know where he's at, so. Okay, I think you're free. Thanks, Randy, very much. Then I'm going to ask that we skip back up now, and we're going to take, it'd be item 33, discussion and action, including potential litigation related to the $200,000 plus sewer bill owed by SID number 1, Woodland Park, and the status of the interlocal agreement for sewer services between SID number 1, Woodland Park, and the city of Norfolk. I would ask to have a motion to go into closed session to discuss the potential litigation related to this bill, $200,000 plus sewer bill owed by SID Woodland Park, and the status of the interlocal agreement for sewer and services between SID 1, Woodland Park, and the city of Norfolk.
I'll make the motion, Your Honor.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. I need you to please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
And with the motion carried, the closed session is to discuss potential litigation related to the $200,000 plus sewer bill owed by SID number 1 Woodland Park and the status of the interlocal agreement for sewer services between SID number 1 Woodland Park and the city of Norfolk. And so we will retire to the training room for a bit.